Hello everybody, welcome back to another Coding with Tyler video. Today we're going to be looking at one of the most important things in all of Python and in all of programming languages. We're going to talk about lists, which are also known as one-dimensional arrays, which is probably a word that you have heard if you've done some coding but not any Python coding. So yeah, we're just gonna hop right in. I do want to quickly say before we get into the actual video here, these videos are going to be a little bit more difficult for me to make because of being back in school and having my own coding that I have to do. These videos take a little bit more time just because it requires me writing some code beforehand to make sure everything works and everything is good. So if you really do enjoy these videos and you don't want them to stop, please hit that like button so that I know that you guys want to see these, and I'll try my best to continue to put them out. So let's hop right in here. I'm going to load up my coding window as we normally do, and let's just get started talking about what in the world a list is. And you're going to love lists. They're insanely valuable here. So we'll just talk a little bit about lists before we even hop into code. So what is a list? A list is synonymous with a one-dimensional array when talking with Python. Technically, there are arrays in Python. It requires something called NumPy, but we're not going to talk about NumPy. If for our sake, we can use lists as a one-dimensional array, and in some ways, you can use them as a two-dimensional array if we have a list of lists, but we're not going to get that in-depth today. Maybe in a future video, we'll talk about lists inside of lists. But what is a list? For those that don't know what an array is or what a list is, what is a list? So essentially, what a list allows us to do is hold numerous pieces of data inside of one structure. So before we had, variable x, which is equal to 10, and that's just one integer, and it's going to sit and stay as one integer forever, and unless we change it into something else. What a list is it allows us to hold, multiple integers or multiple strings or even integers and strings combined into one. So how do you define a list? We're going to call our list LST, and then we're going to set it equal to a set of open brackets. And these are, they're found on your keyboard, just brackets. You'll be able to find them. Not curly brackets, but just straight square brackets. And that is an empty list. Right now we have defined an empty list, and we can put stuff in it, or we can just define it with stuff right off the bat. So how about we do that? Let's say list2 is going to be equal to 1, 2, 3. So we're storing 3 integers inside of our list here. We're storing 1, we're storing 2, and we're storing 3. So there are 3 integers inside of our list. Now, if we want to print this out, we can simply just put, and I'm going to, actually, I'm going to comment this out here so we can actually run some code here. And we're going to say, let's print out list, and let's print out list2. And we'll just see what happens here. So we print these, and I'll drag this up for you. And pretty straightforward. We got ourselves an empty list, and then a list with 1, 2, 3 in it. You're probably like, Tyler, this is pretty straightforward. It is. Lists are not exactly difficult, but there's so many applications of them, and I'll show you a couple of those in this video. So what else can we do with lists? We can print out lists. We can also print out parts of a list using our indexing tools that we learned from the strings video. If you don't know indexing, go back, watch the strings video, and you will learn all about indexing in there. So let's index this list. We'll print the list, list2, at position 0. So this will print the first element of the list. When we print this, you will see that we have 1 because that is our first element in the list. We could change this to be the element at 1, and it's going to print out 2. I don't know if you can do like this. Will it print out 2, 3? It absolutely will. So there you go. You can also use your colons when indexing lists as well, and you can print out the ending of it, etc, etc, etc. So what else can we do with lists? This is all kinds of cool stuff. What else can we do with lists? We can also add lists together. Yeah, that's right. We take 2 lists and add them together. This is known as concatenating a list. So let's change list 1 to be 4, 5. Okay? And then let's come down here and let's say that list 3 is going to be equal to list 2 plus list 1, which we just named as list. When we print out list 3 here, you're going to see that these two lists have been concatenated, so it now says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which could be insanely useful if you're trying to add together two different things that we've just made. It is very, very useful. It should be noted that if we did this in the reverse and said list plus list 2, it's going to take 4, 5, and then add 1, 2, 3 to it. So order does matter when you're concatenating lists, and it's important to note as you're doing stuff. So you're probably sitting here now, you're going, okay, so we have these lists, and they're very similar to strings in some of the stuff we can do with them. Why would we use lists instead of using strings? That's a really good question, and there's many different reasons, but there's two main ones that I do want to bring up here. So why use lists over strings? Let's make this a whole section here. Why use lists over strings? What is the big difference here? There's two main things. So first, we can have numerous types in a Python list. It should be noted this is not the same for all programming languages, but in Python, a list can have numerous types in it. So let's redefine our lists here. I'm just going to actually, we're going to just erase this stuff here, and now we'll add right here some new stuff. So let's type here and say that list is equal to 1, 2, 3, and then also ABC. Okay, so we have integers in here, and we also have strings in here. So what is this going to do if we index this? If we print out the type of list at 0, and then print out the type of list at 3, what do you think occurs here? Do you think that these integers will be converted to strings? Because we can't really convert this string to an integer. That's going to get all kinds of funky in the Python compiler. We know we can convert integers to strings back and forth. So is this going to say, okay, this list it has a string, so this is going to be a list of strings? No, this is actually going to store these as integers and these as strings. And I'll prove this right here. You can see that the list at 0 is an int, and the list at 3 is a string. So we can have numerous types inside of our list, and that is so insanely valuable. And we'll see a example of why that's the case and how that works, and what you can do with it here in a little bit. But it's very, very useful for programming in Python. There's so many applications. So what's another good reason to use lists over strings? We can change parts of a list. So if you remember from the string video, we have a base string, and we'll call it str is equal to hello world. Okay, and if we say the string at 0 is equal to the character b, okay, and then we print str, this is not going to like this, and we're going to get a big old error because string object does not support item assignment. But let's say we change this up here. Let's say we have a list, and I'm just going to erase these guys up here. Let's say we have a list, and list is equal to a bunch of strings. We're going to say, hey, my name is... and then we'll put Tyler, because that is indeed my name. And then we say the list at, let's see, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say the list at 4 is actually equal to my name is Isaac, okay? And then we'll print out our list. When we print out our list, you can see that we replaced Tyler with Isaac here. So we can change parts of a list as we go, where strings, you really can't do that. These two things make lists incredibly valuable because the applications of this are endless, and we're going to hop into a couple of those right now. So you're probably wondering, so we just talked about how we can use lists instead of strings, or use strings inside of lists, I guess is a better way of putting it. What happens if you're solely working with strings and you want to convert that kind of stuff to lists? This is actually insanely useful when working with file IO, which is where we're going to get to in a little bit. So let's convert a string to a list. There's a very basic function to do this, and we're just going to say, so hello, my name is Tyler. Let's convert this string to a list. We're going to grab a list here. Let me just make sure we're not reassigning anything. We'll get rid of that there. List is equal to S, which is our string, and then we're going to call the split function on this. And what this is going to do is it's going to take our string and it's going to split it at white spaces and convert it to a list. So we can then print out our list here, and I want to just keep in mind, we don't have to call list. We can call this ni, okay? And then we can print out ni here, and it's going to do the exact same thing. So this is going to print out, hello, my name is Tyler, where we have all of those little strings inside of our list. And this is good for indexing stuff from a file, which is what we're going to do here in a little bit. So let's do some voodoo magic with lists. Let's show how easy these can be to use. I'm going to get rid of this stuff, and we're going to clear up a little bit of space here for us to work with. And let's create a list. Let's create a list of a bunch of numbers, okay? And we'll think of these as, I don't know, the number of apples we've picked from a tree, okay? So we have 15 apples, 14 apples, 21 apples, 9 apples, one tree's dead, so we'll say 0 apples, and then, I don't know, 17 apples, okay? So these are the number of apples that we've picked from a tree. Let's find the average of all of these numbers, okay? And the average is basically the sum of all the numbers divided by the number of elements that are there, okay? In case you haven't gone over averages in your math class. I find that hard to believe because a lot of you watching this have probably done that, but that's okay. Let's figure this out. So let's create two variables. We're going to create the sum, and then we're also going to grab the number of elements in this list. And we're going to start by doing this the long way, and then I'm going to show you a way to very easily do it using lists here. So we got sum is equal to 0, num is equal to 0. Then we're going to say, so for the number in our list, and if you don't know for loops, go back and check the last video, and you can learn all about for loops there. For number in list, so this is going to pull each number in our list, each element in our list. Let's actually call this element. That's a good way of putting it, because it's not always going to be numbers. It might be strings, it might be whatever we're going through in our list. Whenever we grab one, we're going to increase num by 1, because we want to track and see how many numbers are inside of our list. And then we also want to take our sum, and we want to plus equal the element to that. And we're going to make sure the element is indeed an integer here. I'm just going to typecast it. This won't hurt even if the number is there. And you know what? It's actually better to do this as a float because as we're taking averages, we are going to be dividing. So to get the most accurate thing, using floats is probably the way to go. And then finally, we're going to say that average, we'll just shorten that to AVG, is equal to the sum divided by the num. And that should give us what we want, and we can print out average here, and we will see what the average is of all of these things here. We can see that it is 12.666, which I could take the time to add up all these and do it, but I can reassure you that this does work. If you want to grab a calculator, add all these together, and then divide it by 6, you're going to get 12.666. So this took 6 lines of code to do, and that's not bad. If you want to find an average like that, you can write this extra code, but when you're working with code, you want to be as efficient as possible. You want it to be readable, you want it to be clear, and you want it to be efficient. So we can actually do this average in one line of code. Let's say that new average, we're just going to call it that, is equal to the sum of list divided by the length of list, okay? And when we print out new average, we're going to see that we're going to get the exact same thing as before. We print this out. Oh, I freaking called a damn thing here. Get rid of float. This might work now. God damn it. Give me one sec. Okay, this was a very easy problem to fix. Since sum is a function, and we had sum as a variable name, we had to change that to a different thing, because it was trying to call the variable here of list, and that just got all kinds of messed up. So as you can see, when we run this, our new average does come out to be 12.6 as well. This is using the sum function, which is going to sum up all of the numbers in a list. And then we're also using len again, which I also used in strings to figure out the length of strings. We can use len to find the length of lists. So this will give us the number of elements in our list. This took one line to do this. We could even do, if we wanted to, print sum of this And now this is literally one line of code. And we can just skip assigning a variable if you just need to print out a value. We can do that. It comes out to be the exact same thing. This is very, very useful. No doubt about that. And yeah, averages are easy to do using lists. Let's do a little bit of file IO stuff to end off this video. So what is file IO? Let's get a nice fresh screen here. I'm actually going to erase all this just so that I'm not reassigning variable names in different places and messing everything up, since I know I'm going to end up calling a variable list yet again here. Let's talk about file IO. So file IO, that's how we write that. You can also take the slash out if you really wanted to, but the slash is kind of there. What is file IO? So file IO, IO stands for input output. Okay, pretty straightforward. An input output, you can essentially think of in and out, and that is much easier. So file input output means that we have a file, we're going to read in from that file, and we're going to output to either that file or a new file. And in this video, we're not going to talk about outputting to a file and writing to a new file. We're just going to talk about reading from a file, because a lot of the times you're going to come across times where instead of putting a bunch of stuff inside of your code, you might want to read something from a website per se. Say you wanted to track weather, you could read in data from a weather site and then process that data in your code. So let's actually create a file here, and we can come up here, we can right click on our project, which I have as untitled1, but you can call that literally anything else. And you can't see this, but there is a new and then file, and for some reason OBS doesn't like to capture this, so we got new file. I'm gonna hit that, and we're just gonna call this file blah.txt. okay, and you can call this anything. We're going to, you know what, let's for the sake of this, let's just call it a.txt. okay, and when I hit OK, I know you couldn't see that, but we now have another tab here for a.txt, and this is getting stored as a text file, probably openable by Notepad or whatever, if you're on Mac, whatever the Mac equivalent of Notepad is. We now have a text file that we can write some data in. So let's do a calculator for how many Isaac runs I've won in my life. Okay, so we're gonna do this by let's just let's say, so character and then number of wins. Okay, so our character is Isaac, and then our number of wins with Isaac we'll say is 5. We also have Maggie, and the number of wins with Maggie, we have 10 wins with Maggie. Let's do the lost. I've won 1 lost run. Samson, we have 12 wins with. Samson's pretty easy. And then Azazel, one of the easiest characters, we'll say we have 20 wins with Azazel. So this is our text file, okay? And we're going to read this in and then process the data in this text file using Python and using lists. We're going to convert these strings in here to a list and then process this data to figure out the number of wins total I have. Now, looking at this, you're probably like, Tyler, this is dumb. You have 48 wins. But if we have, like, say there were 700 characters in Isaac and we had wins with all of them, doing that by hand and doing that in your head, that's going to be incredibly difficult. We want to just write some code to do it quickly, and that is exactly what we're going to do. So let's come back to here and let's start writing some file IO code. So where do we start with file IO? We're going to have a list, obviously, that we're going to be storing stuff in. We'll just have it be an empty list for right now. And then we're going to need to open up this file and read stuff. So we're going to use a for loop. This is pretty straightforward. We're just going to say, so for line in, and then we're going to open up our file, and our file name is a.txt. We could also prompt the user. We could say, so s is equal to input, please enter in a file to process. Okay, and then you know what? We'll say we'll open up s here. Does that make sense? If that doesn't make sense, leave a comment. I'll explain it in the comments. But we're going to get a file from the user, and then we're going to open up that file, and then we're going to process it. So right now we know, if we switch back to our file, we first have this line, which we really don't give a damn about. Because we don't really care. Character and number of wins, those are 2 strings. We don't care about that. And then we have a string and then an integer. And we really only care about these integers here that we're trying to add up. So let's use some indexing and some stuff to figure out where we're at here. So let's track the number of lines we've gone through. So num is equal to 0 to start. And we're going to say that if num is equal to 0, then pass. Okay, and pass basically just means don't do anything. Else, we're going to process everything. So what this is going to do is at the end, we're going to do a num plus equals 1. And that way, so since num is equal to 0 to start, we're going to read in the first line, which is going to be character and number of wins. We're going to read in that line, and since num is equal to 0, we're not going to do anything with it because we don't want to process that line. We want to process the next line. So then we're going to come here and we're going to say, okay, so else we want to take that line and we want to split that line, okay? And we want to store that in a temporary list here. Well, we'll call this list up here the num list, okay? And then here we want to say, okay, so we want to grab, we just want to call this list. So list is equal to line.split. This is going to take this line here, and it's going to turn it into a list with 2 things in it. We're going to have Isaac in there, and then we're going to have 5 in there, because all this white space, split is going to get rid of. So then we can index this list, and we can say, so list at 0, we don't care about the character. We only care about the number of wins we have with it. So we're going to take num list, and we're going to plus equal to it, list at 1. And that is going to take our, list that we have. It's going to discard this, and then it's going to take this 5, and it's going to add that to our num list, okay? And this code is just going to work as is, and we can then come down here, and we can say, so print out, we'll first print out num list, okay? And when we run this code, we will see, if we first have to enter a file to process, so we will say a.txt, and I was going to say that the list index is out of range. Why is the list index out of range? I'll figure this out real quick. Okay, pretty easy error to fix. So if we look at our thing here, it's saying that the list index is out of range. So what does that bug mean? And I know that it might seem a little unprofessional to have some errors in here, but this kind of bug testing is actually pretty good to show you guys because some of these errors, you might not understand what they are and you might get stuck in your code here. So list index out of range. This means that we're indexing this list at 1 and it's not finding anything at that 1. And you're looking at this and you're going, okay, so this is always index 0, this is always index 1. How is it never finding 1 here? Well, when we read in the lines, this line right here has nothing in it. So that's going to create an error for us. So we can say that if num is equal to 0 or num is equal to 1, then pass here. Okay, else do stuff. So we can come here, we can say a.txt, beautiful, and then it's going to grab all the numbers from our list here, which it sort of did. it didn't do it exactly right because it did split the numbers that we had, our integers here. So let's find a workaround for that right now. Okay, so I maybe taught you guys a little bit wrong here. I did fix this code to now work and do what we want. When you're doing the plus equals on lists, the correct way to do that is to probably use the append function because concatenating these lists together is going to do some funky stuff. So the dot append for lists is just going to take whatever you're putting on and it's going to put it at the end of your list. You can use plus equals in some ways, but you might get a type error occasionally. So this will work here. We're doing dot append and then we're converting the list at a certain spot to an integer. It should have it as an integer already, but if it's reading it in as a string, we want to make sure that it's an integer. And when we do this, you will see that it does give us our 5, 10, 1, 12, 20 that we do want. So we can print num list and then we can print out the sum of num list. And we will see that this will give us exactly what we want, a.txt, and it'll say 48. So we have 148 Isaac runs. Sorry for the confusion there. Some errors going on. I wrote this code quickly. Don't blame me. Blame the government. That's going to do it for this Python coding tutorial today. Next episode is going to be a fun one because we're going to look at how I created the Wheel of Isaac on the Discord. I'll show you guys exactly how I did it. It's actually just very easy and done with lists. but I know you guys are going to enjoy that, and it'll be a fun time. Once again, please like the video if you did enjoy this. These videos are a lot harder for me to get out, and your guys' support on them means the world to me. So if you do like these videos and you want them to continue, hit the like button, because you're the ones keeping the series alive. We'll say it like that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.